Starting a project feels like progress. You have the idea. You outline the plan. You feel the momentum building. And then, 3 weeks later, the project sits unfinished. You've moved to something new, something that feels fresh, something that hasn't hit the hard part yet. This pattern repeats. You start 10 things, you finish 1, maybe. Ford didn't build the Model T assembly line by starting well. He built it by finishing systematically. Today, you learn why starting is operationally cheap and why finishing is structurally rare. Here's the diagnostic. Starting a project costs almost nothing. You don't need resources, you don't need skill mastery, you don't need proof of concept, you just need the idea and the initial enthusiasm. The beginning feels good because you're operating in the space of potential. Everything is still possible. No failures yet, no obstacles, just the fantasy of completion. This is why everyone starts. The entry cost is low and the psychological reward is immediate. Finishing is different. Finishing requires persistence through the middle phase where enthusiasm dies and real problems appear. The novelty wears off. The obstacles become visible. The work becomes repetitive. And suddenly, starting something new looks much more attractive than grinding through the final 30% of what you already began. This is where most people quit. Not because they lack ability, because they lack operational discipline to push through low-reward phases. You think you're someone who just needs the right project. Something more exciting, more aligned, more motivating. That's not the issue. The issue is that you've trained yourself to associate progress with the feeling of starting, not the work of finishing. So you chase that feeling. You start, feel good, hit resistance, and start something else. You're not building anything. You're collecting beginnings. Pare aquí. Right now, count how many projects you started in the last 6 months. Now count how many you actually completed and delivered. If the ratio is worse than 1 in 3, you don't have a motivation problem. You have a completion protocol problem. You're operationally efficient at starting and structurally incompetent at finishing. Ford understood this in manufacturing. Workers were great at beginning tasks, terrible at closing them. So he built a system that forced completion before allowing new starts. Finishing doesn't require more motivation. It requires operational commitment past the point where excitement disappears. Most people treat projects like relationships. When the honeymoon phase ends, they leave. They think something is wrong. The work shouldn't feel this hard. The progress shouldn't be this slow. So they abandon it and start fresh somewhere else. But finishing isn't about finding the right project. It's about having the discipline to push through the boring middle and the painful last 10%. That's where the actual output lives. Everything before that is just preparation. Ford faced this exact problem when designing the assembly line at Highland Park in 1913. His workers were enthusiastic at the start of each shift. By hour 3, productivity collapsed. Not because they were tired, because they lost interest. They wanted variety. They wanted novelty. Ford's solution wasn't motivation speeches. It was operational structure. He removed their ability to switch tasks. 1 worker, 1 station, completion required before moving forward. Productivity tripled not because workers became more motivated, but because the system eliminated the option to quit before finishing. Here's the protocol to shift from serial starter to systematic finisher. 3 steps. No negotiation. Step 1. Define completion criteria before starting. Be specific. What does done look like? Not make progress. Not work on it. What is the exact deliverable that constitutes completion? Write it down. If you can't define it clearly, you're not ready to start. This is why most projects die. People begin with vague goals and then wonder why they never finish. You can't finish what you never defined. Step 2. No new starts until current completion. Radical rule. You have 1 active project at a time, not 2. Not 3 with different priorities. 1. You work on it until it meets your completion criteria from step 1. Then, and only then, do you start something new. This removes the escape route. You can't abandon the hard middle phase by jumping to a shiny new beginning. You're locked in until delivery. Step 3. Track finish rate, not start rate. Every month, review how many projects you completed versus how many you started. If you started 10 and finished 2, your completion rate is 20%. That's a failing operational metric. Your goal is to push that number above 70%. How? By starting fewer projects and forcing yourself to finish what you begin. This creates accountability. You can't hide behind "I'm working on so many things." The metric exposes whether you're producing or just collecting intentions. Real example. A developer spent 2 years starting side projects, built 12 MVPs, launched 0 products. Why? Every time a project hit the boring implementation phase, he found a better idea and pivoted. Then he applied this protocol. Defined completion as live product with paying users. Limited himself to 1 project. Tracked his finish rate monthly. 6 months later, 1 completed product, 200 users, first revenue. The difference wasn't talent. It was operational discipline that eliminated the option to quit early. Ford didn't become the dominant auto manufacturer by having better ideas than his competitors. Everyone had ideas. He became dominant by finishing what he started, while others chased the next shiny concept. The Model T wasn't the best car conceptually, it was the best car operationally, because Ford had the discipline to optimize one design for 15 years, while competitors constantly restarted with better models. They had more beginnings. He had more completions. And completions are what build empires. Finishing doesn't require more motivation. It requires operational commitment past the point where excitement disappears. Your problem isn't lack of ideas, it's lack of finishing discipline. You don't need more projects. You need a completion protocol that removes the escape route. Define what done means. Lock yourself into 1 project until delivery. Track your finish rate. And stop romanticizing the feeling of starting. That feeling is operationally worthless if it never converts into output. If you want to understand how Ford eliminated waste in manufacturing and how to apply that thinking to your own work, watch the next video.